Welcome to Diverse Orange, our conversations about diversity here in Central Florida. My guest today is Chef Leonardo Tamashiro. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me.
Leo, you have an interesting heritage. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, I arrived to Orlando direct from France, but my origins are half Hispanic and half Japanese. My mother is Japanese and my dad is Peruvian.
And did you grow up in Peru?
Yeah, I was born in Peru, and I grew up till the age of 23. Then I moved out to France, where I live around 20 years.
So in Peru, there's a sizable Japanese population, right?
Oh yes, of course. That is because the Japanese, 1 or 2 centuries ago, they had in their mind that Brazil was the country to reach. That was the paradise. That was heaven for them. So the shortest route to reach Brazil was Lima, and then Brazil. But many of them get stuck in Lima. That one of them was my uh, grandfather and my grandmother.
And then you went to France, so that's a whole nother culture as well.
Yes, well, everything started because I met a girl that at the end or with the years she became my wife. I was studying mechanical engineering. I'm talking about the 2000s, just right before 2000s. I remember that I I transfer my studies to finish them in Brazil. But when this lady came to Peru, she said, "Why don't you come to France?" That was in 1995, and I said, "Yes, we can try." And in '97, she found a university that accepted me. So I ended up in France, and I finished the career of mechanical engineering. And I worked for 4 years as an engineer. And in 2008, I decided to study um, cooking and gastronomy.
And why? What led you to that?
Maybe that, maybe it was being homesick. I remember that my conversations with my mother was centered on food, Peruvian food, how I cook it, mom. How do you? What are your secrets? And little by little, it started to build up in me. And I remember the French; they liked how I cooked, but at the end, I think that the food and was very important to me to the point to leave my career behind. Yeah.
In Peru, um, so how much was Japanese culture a factor in your growing up?
Well, that was 50-50 because I remember that the Japanese family was completely different from my father's family. And when I went to those gatherings on the side of my mother, my father didn't come because he felt a little bit out of place. So I was very happy to be with my mother. And very late, I realized that there were two different worlds. And I'm talking about the before the 80s, 1980s. At that time, what I could find in on on my mother's side's houses was Japanese food, onigiris, sushis, sashimis, mochis. And I remember at that time, nobody could imagine that they will eat that kind of food almost daily.
But you spent time with your Peruvian family as well?
Yes, as well, because the environment is completely Peruvian. And on the side of my dad, they were they like gatherings as well. And my mother was cooking, and she had to cook. She almost cooked Peruvian, and my aunties, they cook Japanese.
Okay.
But the thing is, my mother had a key role in my willings of becoming chef because of all the talkings. But at the early age, I'm talking about when I was 4 years old, I remember that I didn't like to eat anything, only milk and bread. And my mother had a good idea to take me to the market. And in the market, she showed me the fish, showed me the vegetables. And I remember asking her questions. How do you pick a fresh fish? And she answered me with a lot of detail. And when I went back home, we started cooking the fish and the vegetables. And I remember that I really loved the flavors. And the next week, I asked for the same thing and repeat and repeat and repeat. And that was it. I mean,
So
I started cooking and eating with her.
and so then you got great cooking experience at one of the best schools in France. What brought you to Central Florida?
Well, my mom and my dad, they were getting old and they needed some help. So I decided to move into Orlando. The only city that I know or I lived in USA is Orlando. I came straight from France. Well, I didn't have a choice for that.
And how have you found living in Central Florida with all your background?
Oh, that was
Has it been an easy transition to live here?
not at all. That is the most difficult transition that I ever had. The first, the weather, even though it's very similar to Lima's or Peruvian's weather in the coastline, but I was living in France for 20 years, so I was accustomed to have seasons. That is what you don't have very much in Orlando, but that was fine. But the most difficult was the integration. It's very difficult to find uh, Americans. That is, I would say. I have one friend that is American, very American. Latinos are everywhere. But when I come to a country, what I would like to be with or to mingle with is the locals. And the locals are people like you, Terry. And it's very difficult to find them.
No, you didn't say loco, you said local.
Local. Yeah. Sorry for that.
So
But
connecting with the locals has not been easy for you.
no, that's been very complicated. But well, that's been 7 years that I'm living now in Orlando or in USA, and things are going better, easier. I'm feeling more at home. But what I want to say is, when I was in France in 2 years, in 1 year, I said, "Wow, I like this country, and I want to stay here." That's been 7 years, and now I am realizing that Orlando is home. So you see the time lapse is completely different.
Well, I'm sorry that it's taken so long, but we are definitely glad to have you here. We've enjoyed your cooking at the Fusion Fest Aspire Gallery, and your winning at the Fusion Cooking Contest at our Culinary Arts program with Fusion Fest. So thank you for letting us get to know a little bit about a little bit more about you, and I hope more people will get to experience not only your cooking, but your great personality.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry, for the invitation.
All right. And thank you for watching this edition of Diverse Orange.